chose President Johnson's War on Poverty for our presentation. Ultimately, President Johnson announced his plan in the 1964 State of the Union address. He called upon the American people and lawmakers to act on behalf of the poor, citing that there was a failure in society to uplift the poor and that it was becoming a moral obligation of the people of the United States as well as Congress. There was legitimizing, communicating, and articulating the problem. About 20% of Americans lived under the poverty line at the time. So President Johnson again wanted state and local governments to work together to help end poverty. Funds are allocated through a bargaining compromise system. This led to passage of the Economic Opportunity Act, which was a spending bill to help disadvantaged families get help. And this created community action committees as well. In the end, billions of dollars went to schools and teachers, and along with billions of dollars going to the healthcare sector as well.
How it is implementation by bureaucracy and who gets what. Granted subsidies for clothing, food, education, healthcare, job training. It revitalizes cities, fixed infrastructure of poor neighborhoods, Medicare, Medicaid, joint program with states, grant-free healthcare to elderly, disadvantaged people. Elementary and Secondary Education Act increases funding for schools and tries to address the achievement gap by giving more funds for supplies to schools with a high percentage of poor children.
Today we're going to be talking about social policy, specifically when it comes to the war on poverty with Lyndon Baines Johnson. We'll cover right now administration and evaluation. Administration is basically, along with the implementation, it's the processes to carry out the policy, and actually the organization, the bureau, the agency, or the department in charge in seeing all those funds being appropriated properly, the programs being executed properly, and everything that goes along with that. In regards to Johnson's war on poverty, the administration of a lot of the processes went to one, the Office of Economic Opportunity, which would direct the subsidies to poorer communities. Things they did specifically were like creating job corps to provide career training to youth in lower socioeconomic areas. VISTA is a big one, volunteers in service to America to serve disadvantaged communities, as well as other community action programs just to empower people in some of the poorer communities. Along with the Office of Economic Opportunity, you also had the Department of Health and Human Services, which would run Medicare and work with states to administer Medicaid. This would give the states some leeway in appropriating the funds, and also having their own oversight over which communities deserved that money, probably a little bit more. In terms of evaluation, we want to figure out what has happened over the past 50, 60 years when it comes to the war on poverty. President Reagan said in his administration that America had won the war on poverty, and a lot of that was a rhetorical directive to not push for more war on poverty measures. And as you guys know, the only president to take on social policy as large as Johnson was successfully was President Obama. So if we want to look at the numbers today, based on an article from the Center of Budget and Policy Priorities, 50 million Americans were poor in 2012, including 13 million children. So poverty in America is still pretty high, very high compared to other wealthy nations. And a large part of that is not only do we have very large income inequality, but some of the safety net programs we have here in the United States don't do as good of a job in getting people out of the poverty and past that line as other countries could do. That doesn't mean that our social safety net programs are bad. If we want to look at those specifically, like the ones that Johnson put in place, they actually cut poverty in half. 41 million people, 9 million children were kept out of poverty because of programs that Johnson put into place, and this is based on the Census Bureau's supplemental poverty measure. If we actually exclude government benefits, then the poverty rate today would be 29% versus 16% that it is today because of those government benefits. So you can see 13% of our population is not in poverty because of those benefits. While we have seen that rising income inequality and the growing number of single-parent households has increased the number of people in poverty, we do see that increases in education and the ability for more women to work and earn a greater wage is actually helping a lot of people stay out of poverty. So the work is never done. Whatever we can do as our generation of Americans is find the best ways to keep people or give people a hand up, like Johnson said, instead of a hand out. So that way when times are tough, the safety net is there for them. And then when they're ready to move past it and get out of that safety net, they have the tools, the training, the education they need to get out of there. Thank you very much.
Without you now, this is what it feels like.